Totally spoiled.
Her email, Mark can take his daughter. That's a few times.
She's done really dynamic work at St. Paul's, like really helping move our giving to a whole different level. And she's been a great strategic partner with me for that. So I couldn't be more pleased. Plus she gets church, like she's very relational. Yeah, the soft skills that you need on church staff, like you don't always find that in your like advancement office, you know? You can find some slick and smarminess, but she's really genuine.
What she's proud of.
Well, she's good. She's a good girl. And she's awesome. Yeah. Are you hanging in?
Hanging in.
Snowmageddon, it's coming. It's going to be good.
Well, I don't know about y'all, but everybody's used to live streaming.
How are you?
Well, how are you? Same boat. I know you've got the same thing. I've got some people that will intentionally come because it's snowing. So we decided to do church, but it's just going to be me. I don't want to say anything.
Okay.
So I'm going to have one of these live stream. Let's just do it.
One of my, let's just call it touchstone stories. Our organist is married to a retired. He tells a story about his church where they had church one Sunday morning, and they shuffled out all around the church except at the back door. Because who comes to the back door, you know? So, and at the end of the service, they found one of their elderly members lying in the snow with a, not dead, but, had been lying there for some time because she had fallen. And they didn't even know she was there. So, every time I think about church in the snow, I think the people who shouldn't try to come will try to come.
There was been a generation of black people. And he was saying, his arms out. So, one son, ice.
Trying to say, well, so far so good.
He's choir.
Right, because you're permitted.
Three people out here, so.
Yes.
The choir just came out and sat out here.
One thing I wish I had done, I don't know if y'all remember a few years ago, it snowed, I think it was 2017, it snowed on Epiphany Communion Day, and it was like 12 inches, a lot of snow. And so we canceled church, but later I thought, why didn't I just send out an email to all the Old Salem residents and say, you know what, we're going to have church here if you want to walk.
Yeah.
That would have actually been a joy because some of them are members here and some of them go to other churches, but nobody was driving anywhere to go to church that morning. It would have been cool to have all the neighbors in church. Next time, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, that's good.
Whatever snows.
Do you have just like Old Salem residents that serve?
I have, because I live here too, we have a neighborhood.
I see gated community, I see.
That's what it is, yep. Total gated, we were the original gated community.
If you can get a taste of that, trying to get you tonight, with all the coming
Right.
here.
Oh, yeah.
Fair enough. I thought I was like, can I put cards on there?
They check it.
That's-
Check it when you come through all that.
Yeah, just make sure outside.
The cameras.
Yeah,
I was only allowed in because I'm Episcopal.
That's right.
Full communion and all
that's
that.
right.
That's good.
I think it was because the streets have actually been nicely paved for about 6 months, so they had to pick them up again. It gets boring when the streets are paved.
Was there any pushback for that?
Surprising,
Paving the streets, getting rid of cobblestone?
Well, they're gonna put the cobbles back.
here and there, but no spread, nothing that's
But just in a more kind of
been
uniform.
disruptive to the
I
whole
mean, the
community.
streets here were dug
So
up
fortunate.
here too, because they had to redo all that.
Everybody really doesn't want to be the one to get everybody else sick.
The electrical contractor was named Infinity Seafoods around and said, Infinity Construction.
That's right.
I should have been warned, but I was
Oh, this is awesome. That's good. I know that Frank is going to do so much disability access and all that. I imagine that's not always have arms.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how it's done. I think it's
It was an intergenerational.
can't imagine.
All 80s. Here.
They're all unvaccinated.
We haven't lost any.
St. Paul's like that, there's stairs, we have stairs. I used to joke when I first got there, I was like, if you're new to church, just find somebody that's got a red lip and show you around. If you wander off by yourself, you'll have to sit there. Too many left turns. You'll be the host. Yeah, we're getting ready to just look inside of the day, because I think we damaged, we already had because of the water, but then it was exacerbating with asbestos stuff. And I'm just like, that's some more stuff. More construction. Do I have to stop for this? Yes, precisely.
All right.
Hope this doesn't go off while I'm trying to read off of it. Hello, sisters and brothers. Boy, is that a loud microphone. We are in an empty place tonight. Hello, everybody watching on live stream. It is my privilege tonight to introduce my friend, the Reverend Dr. D. Dixon Kinser. I didn't know about the other D. Reverend Dr. D. Dixon Kinser, the 19th rector of St. Paul's Episcopal Church here in Winston-Salem. Dixon attended the University of South Carolina, Trinity Episcopal School for Ministry, and the School of Theology at Sewanee. And he has served parishes in Pittsburgh and Nashville, and recently completed his Doctor of Ministry in Disability Theology at Duke Divinity School. Now, Dixon and I have some things in common. One of them is our group of friends, pastors of downtown churches that we enjoy going out for Mexican food or Mediterranean food with, so that's one thing we have in common. Another thing is that each of us has a favorite recreation of playing music that our parishioners probably wouldn't enjoy. He plays loud rock and roll guitar, I play old-time fiddle. We've never played together, and that should probably never happen.
We're totally going to This is going to happen.
And another example is Dixon and I are actually both serving churches where we were once children in the pews. And that means probably for you, Dixon, like me, that means sometimes you're going, you're minister to your old babysitter.
Oh, yeah.
Or to people you were in Sunday school with as a child, or to the mom of your middle school crush. So it's a fun place to be. And the third example is that Dixon and I both really love teenagers. And Dixon was in youth ministry for 20 years before coming to St. Paul's. And he is here tonight to talk about the spiritual lives of children and youth, and we welcome him and look forward to what he has to say.
Thank you, Jenny. Hi, y'all. You guys must be desperate for some spiritual counsel to come out on a Wednesday night in the middle of a pandemic surge. It's hurting. Everybody that's online, hi. Is that my camera up here? What's up? It's good to see you all. Truly, I'm really glad to be here, and thank you so much for that introduction, Jenny. I really do enjoy our fellowship together and friendship, too. And it's super cool to be able to serve in a church where we've grown up, because there's a lot of connection and love there. But we were talking earlier, I also have a deep affinity, even though I'm an Episcopalian, for Moravians, because if you grow up in Winston, it's just in the water, you know? And one of the cool things for us at St. Paul's, next time you're over, at the very top of the window that's over the high altar, there's a big Gothic arch peak. There is a star that lights up, and we light it in Christmastide. And that was a gift from home church to St. Paul's when we moved to that's the third location of the church where we are now in 1928. So just a super cool thing. We talked about that at the funeral we did together. That was pretty cool. Okay, so here's the question that you got to ask yourself. Why am I here? I'm a husband and a father, right? But my kids, they're teenagers. And I would have a question if I were you that's kind of like, hold on, let me see if I can get my slide to advance. What does this guy know about, parenting anyway? I mean, it's kind of like the jury's still out on my kids. They could end up being serial killers. We don't know. What are the things that I would know? And so I want to tell you a little bit of my story and where I'm going to be coming from tonight. The first is, yes, I am a husband. I've been married for 23 years. I've got 2 children. They are teenagers right now. I'm an Episcopal priest. But I started to sort of wake up to the fact that there were these conventional wisdoms about parenting, and particularly about the way you raise children in faith and like communicated spiritual things to them that weren't going to work for my family. When my son was 3 years old, he was diagnosed with autism. And we went on this kind of journey of recognizing that we had all these expectations, and I had all these secret meritocracies I'd never explored, and things that I thought were just going to kind of be obvious to how life worked for us that weren't going to work. And what's more is, like, when you've got a kid that's on the spectrum, church has got to work for them on their terms. And the way our church was set up, it wasn't going to work. Like, he was never going to sit in angelic wonder quietly listening to a Sunday school story. Like, his sensory issues were going to make VBS forever not a thing, you know? And so we realized early on, I was like, if faith is going to work for this kid, it's got to work in a different way. And that's not beyond God. And so we kind of went on this journey of starting to really interrogate a lot of the preconceived ideas we brought to what it meant to teach kids the Jesus way, and to be kind of spiritual guides to them. And we were in Nashville at the time, and so we were in deep dialogue with evangelical Christianity, which has kind of set the tone for that city, but really has kind of had the cultural microphone around the church for the last 60 years or so. And so I think there is a sense of, like, when whatever you're doing, however you're approaching this, whatever you're bringing into the room tonight and thinking about, whatever the child is that you're related to, that you want to nurture their spiritual life, there's a path for you that's uniquely yours. And all I'm going to do today is not share techniques. I'm not going to share ironclad stuff. I'm going to tell you about things I've observed, both as a parent myself, walking a kind of unconventional path with some unconventional kids who very much love God and are very connected to faith, which delights me, but also what I observed as a youth pastor and doing youth ministry for over 20 years. I interacted with a ton of family systems, and I watched over and over again, like, I started to see trends in what made faith sticky for kids and what seemed to turn them off, like what worked against it. So I'm going to share 5 of them with you. That's all. We're just going to do 5 things. I'm not a researcher. There is research on this, and I'm going to turn you on to it at the end of the presentation. Or if you're watching at home, Google Kara Powell and the Fuller Youth Institute. She is doing lots of research about the spirituality, particularly of teenagers, but she's got a great book about children and families, and what are the things that help make faith stick, that really, that's the good stuff on research, and that's where you want to look for that. Okay, so when we're talking about spirituality with kids, I mean, what we're talking about, I think, isn't necessarily, this is going to be distracting, isn't it? We're going to get there together. It's because it's a PC. I'm like, what is this foreign thing? It's so not intuitive. I'm an Apple person. That was a joke that didn't land. Did anybody laugh at home? Because no one laughed here at all. They're like, they're going to come for me now. Pray for me now and in the hour of my death. All right, so when we're talking about spirituality with kids, I want to think big picture with it. Don't think about it as, how do I get my kid to go to church, pray the Jesus prayer, be a good acolyte. I mean, those can be outcomes. But when we're talking about spirituality, I think big picture, we're talking about helping our kids, in my opinion, approach the world with a sense of awe and wonder, to recognize that they are not the biggest thing in the universe, nor the final word on things, and we are inviting them into the complexities and paradox that is certainly life in this world, but also what it means to be in relationship with God. Like, working and getting caught up with God is a complicated and paradoxical sometimes thing. And part of what when we think about nurturing spirituality in kids, we are helping them develop that competency. So first off, when you think about, or second off, you think about this too, let's think about what the goal of, if you're a parent, parenting your kids are. If you're a grandparent, what is the goal of grandparenting? Like, what are you in this thing for? The goal of parenting is for your kid to launch. It's for them to thrive. It's for them, this slideshow thing is not gonna work for me. We're gonna try it one more time. Oh, there, spacebar worked. All right, don't touch it again. Our goal is for them to fly. Like, that's why we do the 18 years my children were in my house, the continuing relationship you have with your adult children, over and over again, the goal for you is not to protect them, it's not to coddle them, it's not to make sure they have no problems, it's not to make sure they get everything that they want, it's to help develop in them this sense so that when the time comes, they can fly, that they can launch. And if that telos is out there, I think it starts to clarify what our job is when we're doing discipleship with our children and we're teaching them faith. Because my job isn't to believe for them or to control them. It's to help them know how to believe and trust God too. It's to help them learn how this Jesus thing works. And it's so interesting too, because it also, in my experience, released me from thinking that there was kind of one way to do it right. That sense of like, oh, there's this conventional path, and if you haven't hit all these benchmarks, you're not doing it. Oh no, there's so many ways for your kid to launch. And they will. So let's do 5. Here we go. Number 1, and I'm gonna date myself with this reference. Who knows this reference in the room? Yeah, the other Gen Xers. All right, so this is an old 80s PSA, anti-drug PSA. All right, so when the first observation is that your children, your grandchildren will learn about spiritual things and about how to be nurtured spiritually by watching you. They're going to learn it by seeing you do it. When Aiden was diagnosed, I was kind of going through my sense of like, I don't even know what it means to parent anymore, and if we can't do church all the time in the conventional ways, and I don't know, pray an earnest prayer by his bedside. What are we even going to do? How is this going to work? And it was around that time that I came across a scripture that was really helpful. It's in the book of Deuteronomy, and it's when God is talking to God's people about the kind of the summary of the law, the commandments, as they're called here in this text, but like this path that God has given to the Jewish people. He's like, hey, look, which, by the way, the law was gift to Israel. Israel was like, oh my gosh, you mean you're going to tell us how to live in this world in a way that brings like justice and hope and peace and freedom and goodness, and I can sleep well at night? Thank you. Like, it was really good. And so this admonition to the people is this: these commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Certainly, I know you've probably seen people that actually literally do tie these commandments to themselves in the Orthodox Jewish tradition. What I loved about this text for me was this sense of like impressing the commandments here, the law, onto my children while we sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you get up. This thing called spiritual nurture of children, it happens throughout the course of life. It's not something that's scheduled all the time. It can be, but it's so often this thing that happens on the fly. It's the conversation that happens when something happens in front of you and your grandchild, and they look to you and they're like, interpret that for me. Like, what is that? It's when it's the first time they see a homeless person ask you for money, and they go, what was that? You are teaching them the commandments of the Lord while you're on the road. You have this opportunity in this moment to invite them into what it means to be a compassionate person, a person that wants to do justice. You tell them what your practice is. How do you deal with that? What are the things that you do? It happens on the fly. If you think about the most impactful spiritual conversations you've had probably in your life with others or that you've had with your children or grandchildren? Were they a time that you put it on the calendar and everybody agreed to show up and you sat down at the table and you had it? Probably not, unless it was something real bad. Like, I don't know what you did last night, but we're going to talk about it. It happens as you're going along. And I think that's also important and helpful to think about too, because it means that your kids are going to love God the way you love God, right? So it's a question that I often ask parents or ask myself is like, I want this thing for my kid, but am I smoking what I'm selling? Like, am I also involved in this Jesus thing? Am I like giving myself to this faith life? Am I confessing my sins? Am I showing up in worship? Am I being compassionate toward my neighbor? Am I working for, like all the things that go into that? My kids are going to learn it from watching me. They're going to learn it from watching you, for good and for bad. We'll get to that at the end. Side note, you can curate this thing, okay? So like, you can create experiences and then interpret them with your child. Like, frequently, over the course of my kids' life, there were movies, we're big movie geeks, there were movies that we wanted to watch, and we intentionally watched them as a family, and then debrief them with our kids, right? Like entering adolescence, with my daughter, we watched a movie called Mean Girls that really deconstructs and exposes like the toxic adolescent teen culture that happens among teens with like bullying and like it's interesting the way like the social bullying that happens in those circles. Debriefing that movie with her gave her a template and a path to see, oh, like when I get tempted toward those very things, I've already encountered them. And the people I dialogue about that stuff with are mom and dad, because they're here for me, right? So you can curate it, but they're going to learn it from watching you, all right? All right, number 2. Don't be a door number 2 parent or grandparent. I should have had a grandparent on this. All right, here's what I mean. There are going to be things that your child engages that are going to freak you out. It's going to stress you out. You are going to have a visceral reaction of anxiety and resistance to it. And what you will start to find is that if you put too much energy into forbidding something, it will supercharge it with attractiveness for your kid. Okay? So like you can end up making it irresistible. Theologically, it's called the sacred prohibition, and it's what you find in that happens in the Garden of Eden. Like the Genesis poem has got Adam and Eve being attracted to this fruit, and they've been told not to eat it, and it becomes electric with meaning when the serpent shows up and is like, really? You sure you don't want to? Right? But like, you know how this goes. It's like it's the thing that happens when your kid wants to get her ears pierced for the first time, and you're like, absolutely not. And then all they want is to get their ears pierced. There was a study in 1963. It was called, it's called The Effects of Severity of Threat on the Devaluation of Forbidden Behavior. All right, which is an awesome mouthful. But it's basically this forbidden toy experiment where they took a group of kids into a room, and it was full of all these toys, but there was one toy in particular that was really like the coolest of the toys. I think it was like a steam shovel. I'd have to dig through my notes to remember which one it is. But essentially the researchers told half of the kids that if they played with that, the grown-ups would be very disappointed in them. So that was considered like a mild deterrent. Then they told the other group of kids, if they played with that toy, that they would have a more severe consequence. I think I'll be very angry with you. There was something that was like registered as severe threat, okay? So the kids go into the room, they play with all the toys. Like nobody plays with the forbidden toy, okay? 9 weeks later, they bring the kids back. They like engineer a reason for all the children to return. So the kids come back, and the researchers just turn them loose in the room. They don't give them any instruction. The kids that had received the mild warning against playing with the toy, none of them played with the forbidden toy. Every single child that had the severe threat all played with the toy. All of them. It's so weird how our brains work. But here's the thing to pay attention to. There will be a forbidden toy in your kid's life. But it's not forbidden to them. It's forbidden to you. And so part of how you will nurture their spirituality and part of how you pay attention to how they learn things from watching you is to think about what about this thing that you want to magnetize with negative meanings so your kid never touches it. Why is it like that for you? What is it about this thing that you're so scared of? Because it's not really about them, it's something about you. And I'm not talking about destructive stuff like heroin is off the table, right? But it's important, like even when you teach your kids how to engage the things that are destructive, like the way that you talk about it and how you invite them into it, you can end up magnetizing that thing if you over forbid it. And if you are getting that kind of vibe from your relationship with your kid, then actually your child or grandchild is giving you really important data about yourself. Pay attention to that. It's worth paying attention to. Okay, number 3. I love this. Okay. Get younger as you get older. There's this awesome line in 2 Corinthians, and I read it frequently because it's on the list of suggested readings for burial in the Episcopal Church. And part of it goes like this. Therefore, we do not lose hope. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an external glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. There is a way that even though your body aches a little more when you get out of bed, your things stop working like they're supposed to or like they used to, the physical parts of our body, we feel the fact that they are finite. There is a way that even though we age outwardly and get older, inwardly we can continue to grow younger and more vibrant and more joyful and more fully alive. You know the people I'm talking about, don't you? You know the people that as they got older, instead of getting more brittle, fixed in their ways, grumpy, they became more open, flexible. They had this sense of wisdom about them where you could go to them and they had lived life and started to figure out what stuff mattered and what stuff didn't, and they could help you discern it because they had perspective. Grandparents, we need you to be people that are getting younger as you get older. Nurturing the spirituality of your children and your grandchildren, they are desperate for the village elder. We used to have it. It used to be in every culture, right? But the way we do life now and certainly the way we conceive of ourselves as Americans and individuals and stuff, it mutes that. But the hunger is there because it's a human thing, right? And you can get younger even though you get older. It's like, think about the people think about the people that are hardest to love in your church, right? Sometimes they can be the people that are like, nope, I'm just going to resist change because it's change. Nope, I'm not going to reflect at all on who I am. I'm just fine and don't need to grow. I am set in my ways. I don't need to learn anything new, right? Are they people that are fun to be around? Are they people that feel like they have something to offer that's useful, that would be attractive, that someone would be like, please, teach me your ways? But you don't have to be that way, right? I am so aware of this. I get to work with somebody that's 83 years old, and he's on my clergy team. And it's like one of the great gifts of my life to be in relationship with this man because he has forgotten more about ministry than I'll ever know. He's done this twice as long as I have, and he didn't get ordained until he was 40. There's a wisdom in him that's really, really, really great. And I think it's something that uniquely grandparents get to show us. Whether you're like biologically related to a kid or just in community with them. Like, it's the people that figure out how to go through life and like hit those tipping points where things didn't go like you expected, everything went sideways, and you had to figure out either through grief, trauma, or tragedy how to remake things and what you were going to do about it and how to stay connected to God. Well, you know what you're doing? You're living in the complexities of life. And children need to know how that works and what it looks like. And they'll learn it by watching you. My friends, get younger as you get older. I invite you into more flexibility. Because that's where all the joy is. Because paradox, like, look, this faith that we're talking about right now is not a faith of simple binaries. We confess in our creedal statements, and I'll say that we, because full communion, right? That we believe that Jesus Christ is fully God and fully a person. What? What? That doesn't make any sense at all, right? That is a paradox inherently. God is one God, but three persons. Entering into the depths of this faith is about entering into paradox and hanging in it, and you guys get to show us how to do it. Please, for my sake, I need it. I need you so bad. Okay, number 4. Make sure I don't overdo my time here. Learn how to say, I forgive you. Here's what I'm getting at here. When I was in my 20s and training in youth ministry, I had, there's a couple that was older than me, and they did a lot of kind of ministry training with me and my cohort in seminary. And one of the things they talked about was how to manage conflict and deal with conflict, not just in ministry, but also like in community and small groups. And I'd never had anybody sort of teach me about that I could remember. And so one of the things they said was, the way that conflict and conflict resolution is something that's modeled. And so, Dixon, think about in your life, how many times did you see your parents fight? And I was like, not really at all, Some people were like, all the time it was terrible, right? But that wasn't good modeling, right? And I was like, well, I hadn't seen anything. And so their point was, how can you even know how to, to have healthy conflict if you've never seen it, right? So fast forward, like 10 years, I've got my own children, and I'm like ready to like demonstrate through my life with Kristen, my wife, that, what healthy conflict resolution will look like. But pretty quickly, when they got old enough to really get under my skin, I realized that they weren't going to learn healthy conflict from watching Kristen and I manage conflict. They were going to learn healthy conflict by fighting with me. I was going to be the one that fought with them. I was going to be the one that came after them. I was going to be the one that had to say, that wasn't cool. But I was also going to have to be the one that says, I'm sorry. There's a really powerful thing in learning how to forgive. It is central to the Jesus path in this world. It is what will make this world whole, because it is the way in which God brings the justice of the kingdom through the cross. And it's something that does not happen accidentally. It requires training and intention. And so one of the things that you can do in nurturing the spiritual lives of children and grandchildren is get really, really good at forgiving your kids and teaching your kids to forgive you. This can be done in a myriad of ways. Like, some of it can be just simply semantics. Like in my house, we decided no one gets to say, it's okay, it's all right, at the end of a conflict. We had to say, I forgive you. Like, we wanted to name the dynamic. Because the thing about forgiveness that's important is that forgiveness is not saying it's okay. In fact, the path of forgiveness has to involve saying that it wasn't okay. It's like forgiveness is when something happens between you and another person and you name what it was in all of its A to Z-ness. You say, that was not all right, you condemn it, but then you say, but I'm not going to make you pay for that.
release it. Let it go. Forgiveness doesn't keep scores. Forgiveness is not the same thing as reconciliation. Just if we're thinking big picture. Some people you can forgive them, but it will never be safe for you to be in the same room with them. So you should not be. So you can forgive them, but they still need to go to jail for what happened, or there still needs to be a consequence meted out. Reconciliation takes two. Forgiveness takes one. And there are not models of forgiveness in our culture. We live in a grace-stripped culture that is vindictive, combative, and vengeful. And we want, in its pain and zeal to punish, revenge pushes forgiveness out of the way and overreaches with what's been taken. And you're watching that in our politics, you're watching that in the way we deal with our anything happening in our culture right now. Racial awakenings, the justice things that are happening, it's all over, right? And one of the things that the people of God can give to this world as the church is here's what forgiveness looks like. But you can give that to your kids too. We can give that to our kids. So there will be times when, you're going to blow it. You're going to mess up. There's no getting out of this thing without sin. And you will not do everything perfectly. If you're watching at home, you can't do it. Let it go. You can't do it perfectly. There is no such thing, which is good because working through conflict is actually what builds intimacy. But there will be times where you will go to a child and you will identify your behavior as inappropriate. And you'll ask for their forgiveness. And it will shape them for the rest of their life, right? Because it'll start to give them a model of what it looks like for them to say they're sorry to other people. And it'll start to give them a model to know how to forgive themselves. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Is anybody carrying around some stuff that you're still beating yourself up over, right? It's tough to forgive yourself, and so we train in it. And it's a gift we can give our kids to show them how forgiveness works. I hate asking for my kids' forgiveness, especially when I've been really boneheaded. But you'll see it, and it'll probably come with a choice and intention. There'll be a moment where you will have acted a certain way, and you'll become aware that you were inappropriate. But you'll know you don't have to do anything about it. Your ego can lock that down and not have to address it at all. Or you can take a step out and risk and love that kid enough to go to them and be like, when I lost my temper over there, that wasn't okay. When I threw that lamp because I was angry, that was too far. Forgiveness. It's super, super, super powerful. It's the engine of grace, y'all. How could it not be? But they learn it from watching us. And this is something we get to teach them. And families that figure out the forgiveness thing are the families that really effectively nurture that faith in their kids. They keep the faith sticky. Because everybody has to forgive their parents at some point. Everybody, for something. So if you're a parent right now, your kids are going to have to forgive you. So for something. If you don't know what it is, they'll tell you eventually. So just build the culture in so that's not a weird thing. Or that's not an insurmountable obstacle because it's never been done before. If you're in a culture where it's always grace, we know how to do forgiveness, well then the tools and the path is right there. Lastly, number 5, kids that have deep spirits that are nurtured were kids who were enjoyed. They were kids who were just enjoyed. Enjoy your grandkids. Enjoy your kids. My Aunt Carol, my dad's brother, has grandkids, and she will frequently refer to them in saying to my dad, I'm going to go enjoy the children. It's a super creepy thing to say, but it kind of is getting at a deep wisdom, because when those of you that have kids had kids, why did you have kids? Was it because you needed more workers for your farm? Was it because you needed more fighters to defend your village? Were you concerned that there weren't enough people in the world? You're like, I should throw a couple more on the heap? Probably not. I mean, maybe. We are in Old Salem. There was a time not long ago in this very place where some of those were actually true. But it's like, the thing is, like, you had kids because there was like something between you and your partner. And that thing between you, like, it needed to take expression in more than just the love that was between the two of you. And it took expression in the creation of this life. And one of the things that the church has taught and Christians have advocated for thousands of years is that the primary motive of God in the creation of all life, all this whole world, was joy. That's one of the most true things that's at the heart of this world is joy. The joy of the Creator in creating life out of love. And that's why you had kids too. There was a love between you that needed to take expression, and it needed to take expression in joy. So like when you enter into a relationship with a kid and you just enjoy them for who they are, you are teaching them what is most true about spirit in this world. You're showing them that the joy is the engine of this creation. Now, not every kid is easy to enjoy, right? Like, my kids and I were like rocking, and like we have a lot of things in common, but there's some stuff that they engage in, like on TikTok, and some of the things that they find funny in their generation that I'm like, it's like over my head. But I will sit down and be like, all right, why do you love this? What is this that you like? I was a big music geek forever and ever, and like had my like set of music, and like was so excited to like share my music with my kids, and like, oh, I'm so angsty and Gen X-y about all that. They don't care about my music, right? So I enter into theirs. What do you love about this? My son's super into like movie soundtracks. Why do you like this composer? What are you learning about that, you know? My daughter has a little more eclectic taste, but like there's something about every kid that you can find to enjoy. Our job as the grown-ups in the room is to figure out what that is. You know, it's like when I did youth ministry, hanging out with a 6th or 7th grade boy was one of the hardest relational things you could ever do. Like it is just the awkward bus the whole time you're together. And one of the things we learned early on, and I would teach this to my volunteers, is like, you go to that kid and you would just keep asking them questions until you find something you have in common. And when you find that thing, you run with it. You know, where'd you grow up? What kind of things do you like to do when you're not at school? Oh, you like sports. What sports? Okay, well, how about, have you always played that sport? Really? What about other things? What kind of movies are you like? What, it's just something. You ask questions till you find that thing. You will find something to enjoy, even with the most grumpy kid that's the hardest to love, right? It's just a thing. And it's important to remember, too, that, like, whatever frustrates you now about a kid that makes them hard to enjoy, down the road, you will like that thing about them, okay? So, like, what I mean is, like, when my kids were small, right, they kept me up all night. Like, all I wanted them to do was sleep. They're running around, they're making noise in the house, they're beating on the dog, they're, like, spilling Legos everywhere, you know, they're just all these things. Now that they're both teenagers, they sleep too much. I can't get them out of bed. Hey, it's 1 o'clock. Great to see you. We thought you slipped into a coma, you know? Like, it's like this opposite thing that happened, you know? It's like when they're 2 years old, they're like so active, they're driving you nuts. And then when they're adolescents, you're like, will you get off the couch and do something? Right? Like, there's this kind of thing where even what makes them irritating later will probably be the thing that you love about them the most. So look, parenting is a massive responsibility, and it requires the lightness of joy. Seek it in those kids. Which is kind of my last point. And I'll put up a slide for questions, which we can do in a second. In all of this, whenever you engage in spirit and nurturing the things about the curiosity our children naturally have about God and spirituality and stuff, it has to be done in and with grace. Because we're not going to get everything right. There is no one perfect path. But fortunately, the God that we're caught up in Jesus Christ is the God of grace and forgiveness. And so let's release this idea that we can get it right and be perfect about it. Anybody that's listening to this here or online, you're hearing me say something and you're like, I wish I'd known that, and you're starting to do the self-flagellation route. I fail with my kids. Stop. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's grace. You did what you could do. You did with the best you knew how you do to do. We have to let go of these expectations. There is no one perfect path, right? There is, though, the everlasting and ongoing relationship we have with our kids. And those relationships will last into God's new world. So let's care for them and nurture them in spirit and in truth. Thank you very much. Any questions? Comments? Feelings of rejection? I'm going to put up this slide just so you all can see it. That's Kara Powell and the Fuller Youth Institute. Any questions online? About anything? I got it. Had to take like a minute time off your 5-mile run? Nutrition? Splendid. Well, thank you all so much. Well, I'd like to close this with a prayer if I could. Do y'all do the Lord be with you and also with you? How do y'all do that? Do y'all have a call and response? Moravians? No. Yeah. It's not us, yeah. It's all come Lord Jesus, our guest to be. That's just like the only prayer, yeah. All right. Well. All right, well, in my tradition, we've got a little call and response. You might be familiar with it. I'll say the Lord be with you. You'll say, and also with you, and then we'll pray. So, the Lord be with you. Let us pray. God, deeply grateful for this time tonight, and I pray that the words that I've shared, anything in them that is wisdom and is worth being retained, that this community gathered here and online would retain. Anything that ain't worth keeping, may them release it and forget it. And for all of the people that are here, gathered virtually and in person, like they're here because they care about these kids. There's a kid that they love. There's a kid that they want to see grow into a graceful, full, vibrant, joyful human being. And man, I think that's a prayer that you're pretty into as well. And so that desire that's in each of their hearts, nurture and kindle that. Use this time as something that gives some inspiration toward the next right step in that path. And thank you for the gift you give us in our kids and the way you show us over and over again what your new and redeemed and restored world looks like through them. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks, y'all.
I would avoid it if you were going to walk up there and talk to him. Don't get close to the microphone. Tom, I know you're. I say what? I found a nice farm. I think the other generation probably. That the parents were watching all.
But you're the grandparents, y'all are the elders.
Yeah.
Y'all are the ones your grandchildren are really looking to.
We just hope we did something right.
Good many rest don't work. One good thing that I've heard about.
That's true. It's true about bones, you know.